Shakir. Your team. Our pizza. Picasso's. Order online today at Picasso'sPizza.net.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to this Trainwreck Sports podcast where we are here to pay the bills. It is Jake Majka, joined, as always, by my trusty co-host, Mike Bundt. Mike, how are we doing on this fine early March evening? I know that the weather is it good weather in Western New York, do I hear?
It's 50 plus. It was 50 plus and sunny today. It's a great day in Buffalo.
Beautiful.
Especially when we haven't had weather like this in months. I was out without a jacket today for the first time since November.
Wow.
Talking some Bills. Good thing because I'm tired of talking about the Sabres. Yeah.
You guaranteed a win tonight, though. What do you mean? You're hyped.
It's 1-1 right now, and I'm a little bit nervous. But we'll see what it is in about an hour and a half from now. So I still feel confident the Sabres will win because right when you give up on everything, that's when they get the wins that you don't care about.
That's their consistent. They're consistently inconsistent, but you know when to count on them in those ways. Well, we'll see what happens. But we're here to talk some Bills football because as it is hockey season, we're in the middle of hockey season. As we were talking about pre-podcast, it's March. It's college basketball season. This is the last week of the regular season. March Madness right around the corner. But right around the corner, next week, less than a week, is the start of the free agency tampering period, or free agency officially begins on Wednesday the 12th. So we're just about a week out from free agency. Teams have been starting to make moves, releases happening, guys that are intended to get traded. So we're going to kind of break down all the guys, at least from Mike, maybe I have a good list of guys here. Maybe there's more that you're interested in too. We'll see how many targets we can get, who the Bills realistically could go after, free agency wise, trade wise. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about James Cook because I feel like we have to, just obligatory of this Bills podcast. But the combine was last week, Mike. And I don't know about you. The combine for me is a weird experience because I feel like it used to be like the end all be all for a lot of guys. Like I remember guys could like get make or break in the combine. And then we just got more information and social media has kind of changed and everything changed the way these guys and just feel like a lot of things. Yes, Monday players can talk to agents, not players. But a lot of deals are getting in that tampering period. You can expect a lot of deals to be agreed upon that all of a sudden at whatever time. I don't know what time free agency officially starts on Wednesday, but there will be these deals announced minutes after. It's like, that's interesting. How'd they come up with this complex legal document in 4.5 minutes? I wonder how they came to terms with that. But so yeah, with the combine, I don't know about what's your combine experience nowadays? Like how much stock do you take into it as the draft is coming along?
Yeah, I'm not a huge combine guy, to be honest with you, as far as like entertainment value is concerned. I know some people love it. Some of these draft gurus, people that are all about the draft, mock drafts, they'll watch it a ton. I care more about what you do from late August to early January on the football field. The combine just kind of solidifies some things. Maybe there's a couple under the radar guys who work out really well that dart up the draft board and give you a reason to hype them up a little bit more. Maybe there's some guys that had great numbers who you drop a little bit after seeing what they do. But for the most part, I think you are what you are. And the combine, I think, does more to trick people than it does to really help out draft stocks, in my opinion. I think it does more mental gymnastics trying to convince yourself that this person is more special than what they are or that they're worse than what they are. Because if they truly were that bad or that good, you would have seen it on film during their 4 years in college.
Yeah.
For the most part.
I agree. And especially if you're not an avid college football watcher or just a draft person who goes to the highlights and everything, you're going to get an idea of these players. The combine isn't going to change, shouldn't change your whatever opinion you develop on these guys, whether you're taking an info from other, sources or, just from your general watching on Saturdays or however else you want to personally evaluate people because it's fun to evaluate players. Like it's fun to be armchair GMs and pick the things out that you would always want. Like I feel like you and I probably have things that when we're seeing prospects that we're interested in, like we're probably even if it's subconscious, being like, those are the same things line up for guys that we like the kind of guys that we would rather have the Bills go after or whatever. Doesn't always add up with what the Bills do, but I think as football fans, you naturally kind of develop that, and that's what the interesting thing for the combine is for me, is kind of watching those guys play out at this point. But the biggest note from the combine for me is actually mock drafts, which mock drafts are, take them for what they're worth. Obviously, a lot of it's just content at this point, but the thing that's interesting to me is like you see, like as you're looking through mocks, and if you're thinking about the guys putting them together, if they're doing it based off intel rather than just like scouting and other stuff like that, like a thing I've seen in mocks the last 3 weeks, Tyler Warren is not making it past the Saints at 9, which makes me believe the Saints have told Tyler Warren, you're not making it past 9. Like we will draft, take it here. And somebody has that intel and they've stuck him there because they know he's not falling past that point. I think there are a lot of things, if you listen, to the scuttlebutt during draft season, where those are the types of things that happen, that all of a sudden guys are getting mocked certain places and you're like, why is that happening? It's because they have intel that things are happening there, right? I'm saying all that to say, in 2 different mocks today on 2 prominent publications, ESPN and The Athletic, pretty prominent sports publications, I would say, the Bills drafting the same guy, the same player. Do you know who that was? Did you see this today, Mike? Did you see the mocks?
I did not see it, but I'll just guess because I've seen this person mocked a few times. Was it
Okay.
Golden?
No,
Or was
it was
Malachi?
not. It was nope, not Malachi either. It is Maxwell Hairston, cornerback from Kentucky, who is the fastest player in the draft. At the combine, he ran a 4.28 40-yard dash. He was mocked there both in The Athletic and on ESPN today. So does that put your antenna up at all? That right after the combine, the two mock drafts that come out both have the same guy stuck right there in Buffalo in a position of need. And I think about the fit now, a guy he's a slim guy, he's like 183 pounds, but he was a really good corner. I think he was second team or first team all SEC at Kentucky. And obviously speed. Like that's something that the Bills are lacking in their cornerback core, I would say. If you look at their starters last year, Christian Benford, while he's an amazing corner, wasn't he one of the slowest corners who ran a 40? I'm pretty sure when he came out, like his athleticism is not his speed. And Rasul Douglas, my biggest issue with Rasul Douglas last year was that he looked a step slow to me. So this would clearly be a thing where the Bills, they've talked about improving their team speed. Is that a guy that they could be a pretty good guy to pair with Benford? But does there any antennas go up? And do you think this is something you would agree with that the Bills doing?
Yeah, well, it's always interesting when you have all of the mocks start converging on a certain player or two. I wouldn't take too much out of it at this point. It could be a coincidence. Maybe some people are talking and corner is something that the Bills are discussing and they're trying to connect dots. And sometimes it's even during the months leading up to the draft, you're going to go through plenty of different players in these mock drafts. So sure. How often are the early ones ever really right? Probably not a high percentage. So at this point, I wouldn't really take too much out of it, but it is interesting. Maybe the Bills are more interested in corner than what the fan base really thinks. With the depth of defensive line in this draft, maybe that is a possibility where they go corner early and they try to take more depth pieces at defensive tackle or defensive end. Personally, I'm not against drafting a corner early as long as they get a defensive lineman in their system that can make an impact right away. So if they made a trade for a Myles Garrett or another top end option at defensive end or defensive tackle, I'm fine if they draft a corner early, because honestly, you look at this defense, that's a big need. I don't really think Douglas is really part of their future plans. He's already over 30 and he had a down season last year. I would be perfectly fine drafting a corner late in the first round if they had a plan in place to get a defensive tackle or defensive end at some other point.
I agree. And maybe that as we're looking at the draft paired it with the free agency and trade period, which is about to come up, maybe they've already addressed D-line, and maybe they feel comfortable with where they're. Maybe if if they're probably trading this pick if they get Myles Garrett, so that's something to keep note of. But there are free agents out there that maybe they feel like they've addressed enough, and they're like, we need a starting corner across from Benford, a guy we can build with. So we go second. Maybe this is a safety spot too. Maybe it's secondary first, and because like you said, the talk of this draft is that the D line it's an extremely deep D line draft. You have 2 second-round picks. Take 2 swings at D line there, and try to go best available. If there's another position of need where there's a guy like this, where that's a dynamic I have not seen in the Bills defense in quite a long time, especially with Sean McDermott. You think Tre'Davious White wasn't the fastest guy in the world either when he was a shutdown corner. They haven't had a guy with that kind of like dynamic speed on the back end. And the thought of pairing that, if this guy would work out, we're still far away from the draft, but if this were a guy that you pair with Benford, I see the vision of like how tantalizing it could be to have 2 guys on the outside that have such uniquely different skill sets to deploy against the teams that they're working with. But just interesting we got to read between the lines a lot during draft season. So just wanted to see about that. Should we talk about James Cook, Mike?
Yeah, I think we should talk a little bit about James Cook. We didn't really talk about him much on the.
No, we actually avoided it pretty much last week. We just were yapping about other stuff and just skillfully got through James Cook. But it's relevant today because Saquon Barkley got a big extension. Unheard of, honestly. And not in the first year of his deal, gets extended 2 more years. Gets guaranteed, I think it was 32 million or 31 million, but it's a 2-year 41 million extension. So he's a $20 million running back per year. So good for Saquon. It's well deserved. If anybody was going to be a $20 million a year running back, it was going to be him. I feel like Saquon, honestly, underrated storyline of this whole, I feel like Saquon has not gotten enough attention for the amazing season that he had, and like the prophecy fulfilled that has happened now with Saquon Barkley, completely just turning the running back position upside down on its head, being the best player on a Super Bowl winning team. Now, I mean, that team's really good too, but that's really what we just saw happen. So it's really, he didn't win MVP, but whatever. So good for Saquon. But James Cook, another running back who is looking for money, as we've talked about in the last couple of weeks. James Cook wants to get paid. He wants a contract extension from the Bills. He was right on it. A lot of quote tweets, smiles, shrug emojis about Saquon Barkley. Just letting Bills fans, and I'm assuming Bills brass, know that he's paying attention to what this running back market looks like. We know the number that he put out there was 15 million before. He's talked about that number specifically. Saquon just got paid 20. Where do you land on this at this point, Mike? And what if you had I want to look into your crystal ball here, and if you had to look at training camp coming late July, what does this situation look like? Where do you think this is going to be?
Yeah, this
and is also just good guy Gatesy. At least $10. I'll match Gatesy's $10 at least.
Yeah, so I'm conflicted about it right now, to be honest with you. I didn't think he was worth 15 million going into the offseason. I still don't really think he's worth 15 million, even after Barkley's extension today. But that did make me pause and think about, well, the market is now certainly different than what it was just 24 hours ago. I don't think he's going to get in that ballpark, but I certainly now think double digits is definitely within the realm of possibilities. Mm-hmm. I would have said before this all started that, okay, if you got him $8 to $10 million, that would be like fair value, considering that Barkley was making around 12 million last year. Now I think you're at the point where after Barkley gets 20 million a year, what was it around there? You're probably talking like 10 to 12 for James Cook now. I think that would be, it's still a little bit much for my taste, but factoring in that now the cap is going up. Barkley is getting paid. Some of these other top running backs are getting paid. I think I could stomach that a little bit more. 15 million is still too high for me for the volume that James Cook brings to the table. He's not a high volume back that a Barkley is. He's not a explosive receiver like Christian McCaffrey is. He has the potential to do more, but I don't think that I can get to that 15 million point. But if that's the starting point for the negotiations, say he says 15, the Bills say 8, then they end up agreeing to like 11 or 12, I'd be fine with that if that's where they end up going. And AJ, you're a pain. You are a complete pain. He's trolling me for a conversation we had last night. So thanks for watching, AJ. But yeah, I still can't get to 15 in any scenario with James Cook right now.
Thank you for you're talking some sanity back into me, because I've been saying the 15 number is crazy, and then I see Saquon and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm wrong here, like I got to at least consider it. Like, what if I'm mistaken here and the market's good and he's a good player and everything else, but the 20 million, even to get to the 20 million, that's still like a lot of this argument feels disingenuous to me. And this is no shade on to James Cook, who I think is an incredible player. I really do. I think he's an exceptional, like very, very good, very productive NFL back. Saquon Barkley is a once in a generation back. And I think that there's a difference here. Like, Saquon deserves 20 million. I don't think that means running back one in the NFL necessarily deserves 20 million. You get what I mean? Like, I feel like Saquon is a unique case because he's a unique talent. And maybe the only other guy who could have gotten it is Derrick Henry if he was like 3 years younger. Like, I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs should get 20 million when it's time for him to get the deal. Like, when we're talking about like other guys besides Cook who are going to get paid, they're not going to come near this total. So like, for me, the Barkley discussion doesn't have anything to do with James Cook anymore. Like, Barkley got paid because he is a unique force offensively for in this team. James Cook is a great player. He could never have that kind of impact on a team that Barkley has shown that he can have. He hasn't proven us that yet. Can he get to 1,200 yards before we talk? Like, that's the thing is, in my mind, I'm completely with you. I wouldn't go near 15. At my mind, I'm with AJ. 10 to 12 is what I would love to do. And I would also say go into training camp. If he's really not going to budge at all, then go into training camp and see what he does. Like, is he going to hold out? Is he not going to play this year in his contract year? I think the better bet is you get a more motivated James Cook who is in his contract year. And then if you don't want to pay him next summer, if he deserves it, then it's a different conversation. It's a good problem to have. If he has 1,300, 1,400 yards this year in a contract year and he wants to get paid 18 million, I think we'd at least change our tune a little bit, right? Like, we'd at least be like, okay, we've seen it on paper right now, but right now he's not that guy. And we know the Bills like, this is the thing is the Bills drafting Ray Davis threw up those antennas right away last year. It's like, okay, we know the James Cook payday is coming. And so once we saw Ray Davis get drafted, it's like, what's the real plan here? I wonder if that's still the case. I think if you're thinking about the Bills, who they have to pay, and if they need to make additions to this team. So let's say we're shifting weaknesses on the Bills team. Right now, they have a lot of weaknesses defensively. If you could pick a spot on this team for the Bills to be cheap and have a weakness at, what would you pick? Would you pick running back?
I'd pick running back.
That's what I mean.
So
this has nothing for me, Mike. The conversation has nothing to do with James Cook, the player. It has everything to do with asset allocation of the Buffalo Bills salary cap. And if they think we can't slot a running back more than 10 million, let's say that's their number. Let's say in our cap table, we're never slotting a running back more than $10 million a year. And Cook says, I'm not taking anything less than 12 ever. Then you get rid of him because you want to pay one of these. You want to pay Myles Garrett. You might have to lose James Cook. Like, that's the asset. That's the trade-offs that you have to make when you're constructing a championship level team. Like, we're getting better at different margins that could have just that little bit more of an impact. And do you think we'd have a big drop-off if it's Ty Johnson and Ray Davis next year at running back? It might be a little bit of a drop-off. but I don't think it would be as drastic as if we don't address defensive line or cornerback properly this offseason, right? Like, so it's you can't talk about these things in a vacuum. I think that's where the conversation gets dangerous for me, especially on social media where nothing can happen in like that way. AJ asked, are they ever going to pay a wide receiver again after last year? I don't know. I think they're scared of wide receivers now, honestly. And they've talked about loving that Cam Newton went to the Super Bowl with the group of receivers he had. They've mentioned that a couple different times. Like, we don't really need a true number one. Cam got there without it, and Josh is better than Cam in their estimation. So I don't know. Now they're already hyping up Dalton Kincaid, so I think that's what we got to bank on as a true number one. Kincaid and Shakir essentially equaling a number one for Allen. That's
I don't know if they need a true number one, but they do need to upgrade over what they currently have. And AJ says, my point is, if they won't pay a wide receiver one money, do they commit to the running back? I mean, I think the Bills will get something done with James Cook at some point. I think they will keep him around.
Do you think it's before training camp?
I'm not really sure. I don't have a great feel on this. I'll put it like this. When they got rid of Devin Singletary, I was all for it, and I was kind of calling for it. Devin Singletary was a good running back who was non-explosive, and yeah, he was elusive in the backfield, but he really couldn't get to that next level. And the Bills had enough game breakers at that point where if they had a more explosive running back, who knows what that offense could have been. James Cook brings another dimension. That's where, like, he does have that allure to keep him on the Bills. Like, he can take a snap from the 45-yard line and take it to the house. We saw that several times this past year. I don't know if the Bills have other guys on the team that can necessarily do that. So I think that alone probably makes James Cook an attractive player to bring back because of that explosiveness. But the reason why I struggle to get to the money is he doesn't have the all-around next level talent that a Saquon or a Christian McCaffrey have, or even what a Derrick Henry brings, where he has the physicality of where defense is down. So I think James Cook is that tier 2 running back in the league, good enough to make Pro Bowls, have 1,000-yard seasons, have 10 to 20 touchdown seasons, depending on if he gets the goal line carries or not, and gets explosive plays. But for the most part, I think he's that 5 to 7 running back level in the NFL. So it's tough. And as far as wide receiver one, I don't think the Bills are against paying a wide receiver one money. I just think that in the last year, they didn't have the money last year to really do it. And the years prior, they had invested heavily in wide receiver with Stephon Diggs. Before Stephon Diggs, John Brown and Cole Beasley. So I do think the Bills value having a top-end receiver. If they didn't, they wouldn't have traded for Amari Cooper at the deadline last year when the offense was struggling before that point. So I do think wide receiver is still in play. I don't think this offseason they need to go after a dynamic wide receiver.
All right, well, I'm going to pin you right there. Let's get into
our draft one. They could draft one, and I'm not against a free agent either.
Let's get into our game because I have 4 wide receivers on this list. And now here's the thing, Mike. With these guys, also I want you to think about the names that I give you, like the type of maneuver this would be, and if there's anybody comparable in your mind, especially when we get to guys that aren't like star names. If there's another comparable guy to that, let's work through if there's any of those guys too, and I'll mention them when I get to them too. But so let's get to the receivers. So you don't think they need to go after a star. So you don't think Devontae Adams is a real?
I mean, I'm not against going after Devontae Adams. Like, I'll put it like this. And I know we're going to go over all these players right now.
I have 4 receivers for you. So
number one focus is D-line, whether that be defensive end or D-tackle. Number 2 focus on this team is cornerback, in my opinion. And then number 3 is wide receiver. Now, for wide receiver, it's what type of receiver do you want, and how much are you willing to pay them? So for me, if they can find a speedster, they can find somebody that can stretch the field, that's almost as important as finding somebody that could be a true number one. Like, I don't need a true number one. I need somebody that's going to do a role that can improve the offense overall.
Okay. I think that Adams would be too big of a swing. I don't think that they need I really don't think they need to add to the offense that much. As I agree. I'm with you. I think that would be too much. But I think there are a couple guys that they could still bring in that fill some roles. And one of these guys of the next three, let's get the familiar face out of the way. If the move was just Amari Cooper at a reasonable deal, would you be okay with it? Would you be okay with bringing Amari Cooper back, who's clearly diminished physically a little bit?
Well, it depends what a diminished deal is for Amari Cooper. Is it $10 million a year, or is it how much money does he want?
It's true.
I think Amari Cooper, I'd be fine with bringing him back into the fold if it's not a huge contract. If it's something like $10 million a year, that's fine. But Amari Cooper probably will try to say like, "Hey, I had a bad season, but I was traded mid-season. I had some struggles with bad quarterback play with the Browns earlier in the year, and then I come to a new team, didn't have enough rapport, have a little bit of injury." He could still say like, "I'm still a 1,000-yard receiver who just needed time to acclimate himself into the offense." So like, I don't know if Amari Cooper would take $10 million to stay with the Bills. I could see him still testing it out to see if he could get more money. But yeah, if you could say you could get Amari Cooper for $10 million or less, I would say okay. But I don't know if that's really realistic. Once you start talking like 13, 14, 15 million, then I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I want to pay Amari Cooper that. But it would depend on term. Like if you got a 1-year deal, maybe I'm willing to eat up 13 million, 14 million to try to keep him and try to see if he has something more in him. If he wants like a 3-year deal at his age, I'm going to be a little bit more scared to give him that type of deal.
Yeah, its spot track is 14.2, and its 2-year market value deal would be 2 years, 28 million.
Like, doesn't that seem a little risky at this point?
I wouldn't do that.
Season?
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. But so, I wouldn't pay him 14. I think I would rather pay him 9 or something like that. I think under 10 would be the thing. In relation to that, would you rather take, if you're taking a chance on a guy, an older guy, would you rather take a chance on Chris Godwin coming off an injury if it was around the same price as Amari Cooper, a competitive price, let's say 13 million?
I don't know if I even need a big name guy like Chris Godwin. Like, I guess you could see if there's something still left in the tank. I don't need.
He broke his ankle, and so I don't know. Like, that's an injury. I feel like he could. I feel like that's not like one where it's like, oh man, it's going to be a tough rehab probably for him. But I feel like it's not one that's like he can't come back and be productive again at least. But keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I just don't know if I don't know if Chris Godwin or Devontae Adams or any of these random former names are really going to appeal to me. You don't really know what you're getting out of them. It's until you see them play, you really don't know. I mean, they could come out and they could be great. They could still have something left, and but we just don't know. I would say this: I'm not 100% against Devontae Adams. It's not the guy I really would like have number one on my target list. But like, if you could get him cheaper, I wouldn't be against the idea. But I'm not going on my way to say, oh, get me Devontae Adams or Chris Godwin. I like younger options in this area, not older options.
All right, the only other guy I have on the list, Mike, is Hollywood Brown. As a guy where that's more of your role. Like, we need the speedster. Let's go get a guy who plays a specific role for Josh Allen and a guy that he wants, evidently, reportedly.
So I'm more open to Hollywood Brown. I know he didn't do much last year. He was hurt, but he is a little bit younger than the other guys that you mentioned. He does feel a little bit more of that vertical threat if he still has that in him. He was able to come back for the playoffs. I would put a flyer out on Hollywood Brown if he was willing to come to Buffalo and you could get him on a fair deal. A lot of this is all like, what type of deal are you signing them up for? Obviously, if you get any of these guys on a cheap level contract where they're willing to play for a contender and try to compete for a Super Bowl, you'd sign them up in a second if you get them on a fair deal. I'd never say no to any player if you can get them on the right contract. So to AJ, they're saying no thanks. I mean, like, we don't even know what the terms would be on something like that. If you're talking small money, why not give it a shot? You have nothing to lose. The Bills signed Chase Claypool. Like, I mean, did they lose anything by signing Chase Claypool? No, like they cut him and because he had an injury and that was it. Like you can bring in any of these guys, and depending on what happens, you'll see. And people are saying, not Hollywood, he's an injured player. Like all these guys we just mentioned are older players that could be injury liabilities that are coming off of stuff. So it's nothing is guaranteed. Like it all depends on the role that you're looking at a player. If you're saying, oh, has Hollywood Brown, like he's going to come in and be the number one receiver? No, hell no, he's not. But like if Hollywood Brown comes into Buffalo and you have Keon Coleman as your 2, you have Shakir as your 3, you have Hollywood Brown as your 4, and then like you mix in another outside threat to like take on some of the number one receiver responsibilities. Like, is that awful? It's probably not. You could probably get by doing that. So I hate when people are kind of saying no way, oh, we got to get him, or there's no way we should get him. We don't know. Like people would have said last year that the Bills receivers were awful and that their offense was going to take a step back because they didn't have Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, and they were going to be a run-first team. And guess what? They had their most points per game in several years. And if you compare it to the rest of the league, it was probably their most prolific season scoring-wise of the Josh Allen era. So that really goes to show what public opinion means, because public opinion was 100% wrong with everything they said about the Buffalo Bills last year. So I really don't want to talk for Brandon Beane and everything, because we don't even know what they're trying to put together for this next season.
Yeah, John Roberts saying the rumor. I've seen rumblings that they could be interested in Darius Slayton. I'm not moved by Darius Slayton that much, but it is what it is. We'll see what happens with the receiver room. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. The rest of this is all defense. That's what I've lined up for you here, with the obvious headliner, Myles Garrett. Would you pay the price, whatever that price is?
I mean, absolutely.
Keep it going, whatever it is. How many first round picks would you give him?
I would give 2. I'd give 2 first-round picks, and I would give more than that too if needed. Like, okay, not like more first-round picks, but like I would throw a player in.
2 and some change.
I would throw a 2 and throw in other picks. I would give up a second or something. I think Myles Garrett is arguably the best defensive player in the NFL, and if Bills fans that are comparing this to Von Miller, it's just not even close to the same thing. And it's kind of frustrating that people are scared because of what happened with Von. Von was 33 years old. He already had an ACL injury. He was going into the later years of his career. And you know what? You could still argue he was a good player at that point and was very good until he tore his ACL again. Myles Garrett is 29 years old. He arguably has like 2 to 3 prime seasons left.
Yep.
And then even after that, he'll probably have some good years at that point in time. And you factor in, this guy is basically, I'm not saying he's Bruce Smith, but like he's close to what Bruce Smith is this era.
He is as productive as Bruce Smith has been.
So
that's at
like,
least.
if you ask a Bills fan from the 90s, would you trade for Bruce Smith? Like, hell yeah, you would trade for Bruce Smith if he wasn't on the Bills. Absolutely, you would. And John, I see what your comment is, but you're forgetting a few things. Not to be disrespectful right here, but the cap, there are workarounds. The Bills last year entered the offseason tens of millions of dollars over the cap, and then ate $30 million in dead money with Stephon Diggs just to get him out of Buffalo. Ate dead money on other players as well, and still found a way to get under the cap and bring in several players in free agency. The Browns right now are in a sticky situation with Myles Garrett. If he doesn't report to camp, if he doesn't report to regular season games, not only do you have you have more issues on top of that. First of all, then you're paying this guy. You're not getting anything back in return. And they're a rebuilding team. The Browns have no quarterback right now. They're not going to be good anytime soon. Their division has Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and even Pittsburgh still finds ways to make the playoffs. They are in a spot where Myles Garrett, while technically doesn't have a lot of leverage, they're going to have to find a way to eat the bullet and make a move. Right now, before June 1st, it's a $36.2 million cap hit. If it goes after June 1st, it's about 19.7. It gets split up between the 2 years. And I understand a lot of what you're saying here, Joe, about the latest mock drafts and different things with Myles Garrett. But we're in a new era of football. I'm not going to say it's like the NBA, but in the NBA,
no, I was going to say player empowerment
it's shifting. When a player wants out in the NBA, they get out. And what's happening in football is we're entering a more player empowerment era where if a player isn't willing to play for you, they hold the cards. Because, yes, the Browns can fine him. But if Myles Garrett wants to be adamant enough, he doesn't ever have to play another game for the Browns again. And if he doesn't and they don't trade him, guess what? The Browns just missed a chance at rebuilding their entire team for the future because they played hardball and they lost. And then when you hold out into the season, what happens? Your value goes down even more, and then you get less in return for that said player, and then you have an egg on your face as a result. If the Browns were competitive right now and they were fighting for playoff spots and they were a quarterback, like maybe a player or two away from being maybe a contender for Super Bowls and being good, absolutely they would have the leverage. They would hold Myles Garrett and he would have to play. They are nowhere close to being a good team in the NFL right now. And as much as Browns fans would love to keep him, it's not going to happen. Deebo Samuel is a totally different situation. He's a wide receiver that's approaching an older age.
I would be worried that San Francisco gave him up for a fifth more than anything.
A defensive end like Myles Garrett can be good into his mid-30s if he wants. It's a totally different player. And it'd be one thing if he had already shown signs of declining. Myles Garrett right now is arguably the best defensive player in football. If he's not the best, he's number 2 or he's number 3.
2 or 3, yeah.
And it's really not an argument. It's a consensus. If you have a chance to get a player like that, you get him. Bruce Smith was getting 10-sack seasons into his mid-30s. Like right now, the Bills are arguably one player away from being a Super Bowl team. And where they're lacking the most is the defensive line. They're 1 sack away from Pat Mahomes in a third down situation against Kansas City in the AFC Championship from winning that game. So I know a lot of people are going to say, but this, but that. Well, is the answer continuing to draft defensive ends and defensive tackles in the late first round, second round? We could talk about how they're going to contribute in 2 to 3 years from now and how they'll develop into a Greg Rousseau. Well, I hate to say it, Greg Rousseau isn't good enough for the Bills right now. They need more than that. So if you have a chance to get Myles Garrett, you go after it. And I'll be real, the Browns are saying they're not going to do it, but they're not going to do it right now because they still want to talk him into staying. And the cap situation stinks right now. But
everybody's first stance when they're dealing with something like this is we're not trading the guy until you're trading the guy. Until it's like, we got a good deal, it was too good to pass up, or we decided that it was time. Like that's
we've seen this happen too much before. Like we know how this plays out. This is a bad team. They're going to be put in a bad situation, and eventually, Garrett's going to either become a problem for Cleveland, or he's going to end up caving and giving in. But at this point, he has made it abundantly clear he's not about a contract extension. This is not about money, and when it's not about the money, it's a lot harder for a team to appease the player. So if the Browns could be like, hey, we'll give you a massive contract. Well, Garrett doesn't care about the massive contract. You're not going to make him happy in that scenario. It's clear to me right now, Garrett only cares about one thing. He wants to win. And that's another part that hurts the Browns in this situation. Because
they're going to pick a quarterback.
Garrett has even said, like, well, I can't veto a trade. I can't tell you where I'm going to go or where I can't. You can put me anywhere you want. And if Garrett wants to be professional, that's what he'll do. But let's be real here. If the Browns want to trade him to the Patriots and Garrett wants to do the same thing to the Patriots and say, I don't think you guys are good. You play in the same division as the Bills who've won 5 straight AFC East division titles. I don't want to be a Patriot. Then he doesn't show up to the Patriots at all. Then the Patriots are in that spot. So the Patriots aren't going to trade for a guy that's going to do the same thing to him. So back in the day, you're traded, you showed up, you did your thing. But now even if you don't have a no trade, because Miles Garrett is such a big player and teams are going to have to give up so much to get him, he could just say no to a team and do the same thing to that team, and they could take the risk. But what happened to Hassan Reddick and the Jets? It blew up in their face. You don't do that. You put provisions in trades now where you're like, if it doesn't show up, this trade cancels out and like you go back. So I don't think it works trading Miles Garrett unless he goes to one of his preferred locations. And one of those teams is just going to have to give the Browns what they want.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the state of the league now. And that's Miles Garrett. I would be surprised if he is a Brown next year. And if he is on that roster, it's going to be a holdout. It's going to be a messy situation, which also wouldn't surprise me because the Browns, they love to be in messy situations. That's just what the Cleveland Browns do. So maybe they do hold on to him and make this messy and excuse me, keep this a thing all summer. I could see a world where that happens.
They want that? Like I don't see, like, selfishly, I want him on the Bills. Like I would love to get him on the Bills, but the thing about it with the Browns is like, and yes, I'm biased when I'm saying this. What benefit does keeping him really do for the Browns as far as becoming a better team? Yeah, he'll get his 14 sacks next season if he's healthy, his 15 sacks. But where are you going as a team? You're not finishing ahead of the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. You are not finishing ahead of the Bengals with Joe Burrow. You're probably not even finishing ahead of the Steelers because they go 500 or better every year. So you're not.
It really depends. We'll know exactly what they actually think about this team in a week, because if they're a team that's trying to sign Sam Darnold or trying to pick up a Kirk Cousins or trying to get some guy to come in and be a bridge quarterback, then I think that they're going to try to maybe hold on to Garrett.
That changes things a little bit. But if you're getting Sam Darnold, I don't think Cleveland's as good of a situation as what he was in Minnesota. And that could burn out and that could create other problems. I think right now Cleveland is more than a quarterback away from being good. And
but does Cleveland think that? Does Cleveland think they're more than a quarterback away?
If Cleveland thinks they're a Sam Darnold,
because if you're Cleveland and you're that front office, you can blame a lot of your problems. Now, if their problem that they signed him in the first place, but you could say our owner fell in love with Deshaun. We fucked up. We're eating our medicine now. But this is what, if we had a competent quarterback last year, we wouldn't have had such a mess of a season. Look what happened last year when we had competent quarterback play with this team. Like you could see how they can build that case.
Yeah, but that's just if that's the way they're thinking, then they're just as dumb as the Buffalo Sabres thinking Taylor Hall.
I think they are. I think those two organizations are like
flawed system.
That's
right
like
now,
best friends right there.
It's not even that like they can't be good with Sam Darnold. Maybe Sam Darnold comes to your team and you make the wild card. But
what's your ceiling?
Is that what you want to be? Like if you trade Garrett, you're probably getting back 2 first-round picks and maybe additional stuff on top of it. You can use so you'll have your 2 firsts this year. You'll have 2 firsts next year. You can use those picks to rebuild your entire team. And then you have assets to where if you need to go up into the top 5 in a draft in a future year, you can get a top-end quarterback to really change your franchise for good. Or you can build an offensive line, a defensive line, and make sure that you're good in the trenches. You can add skill players. You can do whatever you want. And yes, you have to hit on those picks, but you're giving yourself the capital to get top-end talent. I think my issue with the Browns is even if they get Darnold, they're behind the Ravens. They're behind the Bengals. And with Garrett, you probably have 2 to 3 prime years. Are you going to be competing for a Super Bowl during that time period? Not likely. And this quarterback class right now is horrible. Like you're talking about Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders. You're not going to be getting much out of either of those. Probably
it's not like if you had the number 2 pick last year. That's for sure.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where if I'm the Browns, like, yes, it's frustrating. Like they missed on Deshaun Watson big time, and yes, they have had a couple playoff stints in the last 5 years. They won a playoff game with Baker, and it'd be frustrating to tell fans like you're rebuilding. But what's more frustrating? This is an organization that 2 seasons ago made the playoffs with Joe Flacco and probably could have been competing for a playoff spot again this year. But they decided we're going to stick with the $60 million quarterback that has offered nothing to our team over having a competent backup. Why didn't they bring back Joe Flacco? Because the fan base wanted Joe Flacco, and they were afraid of the fan base calling a quarterback controversy for the 38, 39-year-old, however old veteran over the guy they're paying massive money to. But let's be real. They didn't make the move to retain Flacco because they were afraid of a controversy and they're afraid of the headlines. Let's be real. If they would have had Flacco, they would have been a much better team last year. So the Browns did things that acted against their best self-interest. And by keeping Myles Garrett, that would be a repeat decision where they're hurting themselves more long-term. Yes, I want him on the Bills. And the reason why I think it's okay if the Bills make this mistake, if it doesn't pan out, is what is the one thing the Bills really need? They need their defensive line to take that next step. You can draft corners.
So you'd go for this too?
I would go for this in a second too, and it'd probably be less of a price. I don't know if the Raiders want to give up Max Crosby.
It seems like the Raiders are gonna try to convince Max we're gonna win this year. I feel like the Raiders, I don't know how, but I think the Raiders think they're gonna win this year.
Well, you got Pete Carroll. That's the first step. He's done this in other places.
Yeah.
He'll at least try to convince the Raiders he can do it there. A 73-year-old coach ain't taking a job to try to make it a rebuilding project. He's probably there to try to make them a winner right away. I 100% go after Max Crosby. I just don't know if he would be something that would be attainable or not.
But so you're all in on first of all, I was playing devil's advocate most of this. I'm all in an agreement. I would pay whatever price for Myles Garrett because I think if you have Josh Allen and Myles Garrett together with the iteration of
Chris Jones, that's why.
Yes.
Think about what lost the Bills the game in the AFC divisional round at home. It was
game
Chris
record.
Jones getting pressure on Deion Dawkins and tapping. Getting into Josh Allen's face when Shakir was wide open. You don't everybody always acts like, oh, you need a superstar. No, you just need that one play. It could be the final play in the fourth quarter. It could be a random sack in the second quarter. But that one extra time you get off the field is the difference right now between the Bills making a deep run in the playoffs and losing in the divisional round and in the divisional round in the AFC Championship. So I'm 100% all in on getting one of these guys because I honestly think the Bills' defense lacked talent last year. I think it was a very blah defense talent-wise. A lot of bottom-end players, in my opinion. I don't say that to just be insulting, but I truly believe they were a top 15 unit overall because of coaching and scheme more than what they had players playing and suiting up for them last year on defense.
Yeah. I agree. So let's move through the rest of actually one more trade candidate then. Jonathan Allen, who I think along the same lines, the injury does worry me a little bit as an older interior defensive player, but I think he'd probably be the cheapest out of these three. You could probably get him honestly for a day 2 pick, maybe even I don't think he's going to go for a high end. And that asks me to, if you're going to address a spot, would you go interior or edge? And I think it's Garrett because if you can get Myles Garrett, you just add him to the team and figure everything else out around him. Because that's when it comes down to acquiring one of these guys. I think you swing for Garrett because then you have just there's no cornerstone on the Bills defense. There's nothing you can point to. Like with the Chris Jones thing, there's a lot of defense. There's no anchor on the anchor is Sean McDermott. I feel like. There's and I feel like we've given it to Bernard in the past or in the past with the safety duo and everything, but we've never just had the guy that is just the game wrecker in the way that you can be on a defense. We don't TJ Watt single-handedly wins games for the Steelers at times. Myles Garrett could do that for a team that isn't the Cleveland Browns. A lot of the stuff that you were saying is right about the Browns. And the Browns are just a stupid team. They're just a bad organization. That's a lot of Myles Garrett, the reason he hasn't had success in his career. So I would take the big swing, but I'd also go after a guy like Allen. I wonder if, the year that they signed Beasley and Brown, it was a lot of mid-tier signings, right? The Bills have loved living in the mid-tier free agency swings. And I wonder if that's where they end up, where they go a medium trade for Allen, and then some medium swings on starter level guys, and then keep their big draft picks if they can do that. And that's where I think the Allen trade scenario comes into play.
Yeah, I'm not against Jonathan Allen. He would definitely help the interior of the line. He's a big name very solid career, and I'm open to it if the price is right. I'm going to say that most of the time. I'm open to it if the price is right. I'm not closed off to options, and I don't think Brandon Beane is closed off to options. I think you always reach out, see what they're looking for, and see if it's within what you're willing to give or not. I prefer a guy like Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. The reason why I do is I want that game-changing player.
Yeah.
And people have argued all offseason, interior line, edge, what's better. Like, it doesn't matter what direction you go. You need somebody that can be an impact player on your line. Yes. When you see how Philadelphia got it done, they got it done with their interior. But that doesn't mean that if you get a Jonathan Allen, suddenly your interior is going to be wrecking opposing offensive lines. Like, you need someone that's going to step up. No, it's no guarantee that whoever you get is going to be an impact player when you're drafting at 30, when you're getting people in the second round, when you're getting mid-level free agents.
Think of how good Ed Oliver would look if Myles Garrett's playing next to him. Like, Ed Oliver, all of a sudden there's all the attention's to Myles. Like, the impact that Myles Garrett would just have for a trickle-down effect for the talent that already exists for this Bills offensive line or defensive line, if they don't have to give up any of those guys.
That's the thing. Myles Garrett will make everyone's life easier because he will command double teams. And if he's not doubled, he will win one-on-one matchups. And what did Philly
And if he's this serious about winning, McDermott's going to tell him, like, bro, you're not going to have 17 sacks with us because we're going to use you to draw. Like, they're going to smartly use him as a weapon to draw attention in ways. Like, that's the thing is McDermott hasn't had a queen on the chessboard like that ever, right? Like, I don't think there really is a guy that you can say is a difference maker on that level defensively for this iteration of the Bills.
I think this is really easy. If you get a chance to get the defensive player of the year on your team, why don't you? And it makes everything easier. It makes life for your linebackers easier. It makes life for your corners easier. It makes life for your safeties easier. Because you know what? When you're getting pressure without having to blitz all the time, people are going to be in better position. And that's what Philly did against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They were able to get pressure. Yes, a lot of it was interior, but unless you know you're getting a dominant interior player who's going to replicate what the Eagles did, which literally almost no other teams were able to do against Kansas City this year, I'm going to have a hard time saying, okay, go for an interior player over Myles Garrett. So it's all what do you value? I'm willing to give up a couple first-round picks that I think will be picks 29 or 30 the next couple years for a guy like Myles Garrett. Now, if they ask for the Bills to throw in a third first-round pick, then it gets a little costly. If they ask the Bills to throw in a Greg Rousseau in addition to a first-round pick or two, gets a little costly. Then you have to have some answers. But, like, I find it so funny that, like, all season, all playoffs, fans are like, this defense doesn't get any pressure. This defensive line, they always blitz. This defense doesn't show up in the playoffs. And then they have a chance to people bring up, like, should they go after Myles Garrett? And they'll be like, no, that's too much. That's too much. How do you think the Eagles got some of the players? They made aggressive moves. Like
the Rams a couple years ago, man.
The Rams got Von Miller and won a Super Bowl because of an aggressive move. Like, that's what you sometimes have to do. And just because it didn't work out when the Bills got Von Miller doesn't mean it won't work out when they
doesn't mean you should be risk averse. Exactly.
What people are showing is the same people that are like, the Bills need to do this, this, and this, and this to win a Super Bowl are the same people that are like, oh no, I want to keep my first round pick in 2026. Like, no, like, what is that first round pick? You need a 30th overall pick. Like, if you want to know that you're drafting a game-changing defensive tackle, you need it to be a guy in the top 10. You really do. It needs to be a guy in the top 10. If you're picking, like, yeah, people say, well, Aaron Donald was in the 20s or whatever he was picked. Well, not everybody. Aaron Donalds don't grow on trees. I'm sure if people knew he was going to turn out to be one of the greatest defensive players of all time, they wouldn't have waited till they waited to draft him. So John, another thing here, the Bills need to stop the run. They most definitely have to stop the run. But the reason they don't stop the run isn't necessarily even the defensive line. It's the system of defense that they play. They run a nickel defense where they have Taron Johnson as basically the third linebacker. They're undersized. The Bills, the way they are constructed, they go after tall, lanky defensive ends. They go after quick, most of the time, defensive tackles like Ed Oliver, and then they try to get a guy like Daquan that's going to be bigger, take on double teams. They have linebackers that are smaller, that they want to be fast and be able to be in coverage. And then cornerback and safety, it's basically system. They all work together in tandem. The Bills believe, for the most part, they can put almost anybody in their secondary and that they'll find a way to make it work because they believe in the system over the talent of the individual player. And linebacker, they want to be small, they want to be quick, they want to be agile. But that's also why they have injury and durability issues because they're undersized. And when they play in the run, they get hit and they get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
The defensive line wise, they struggle against the run because when you have one less linebacker and you're playing to stop the pass primarily, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage against the run almost every time the ball is snapped. The reason why they don't care about that is because they've been great stopping the pass for most of McDermott's time. So when we say like, oh, they need a better run defending defensive tackle or we need a better run edge, none of that really applies because if you came from a better run stopping defense and then you're going to the Bills defense, you're being put in a worse situation to have success against that. What the Bills need more than being good against the run is they need somebody that can make a play at any given time regardless of what situation that they're in. That's why Myles Garrett, that's why Max Crosby makes sense because we're not talking like the Bills defense last year was okay. It was good at moments. It was bad at moments. But in the end of the year, it was really an average to slightly above average unit compared to the rest of the league.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs,
especially the rest of the teams that were left in the playoffs.
The Chiefs won a Super Bowl with a defense like that with Pat Mahomes. But what did they have? They had Chris Jones. They had a guy that could make big plays in timely moments. Why do the Bills have the defense the way they do besides being good against the pass? They do normally create pressure at decent rates in the regular season. They do create takeaways. They create turnovers. Like, I love the getting of one tack that can push the line backwards, but so does every other team in the NFL. If it was that easy, every team would have one. It's at this point in time, we basically know the Bills defense is what it is because McDermott is a good defensive head coach. He has them positionally sound. They go according to the scheme, and they follow their responsibilities. What they need, though, to take that next step and win when it matters in the big games in the playoffs is they need game wreckers that can rise
and they've told us that by the way that they've with the Von Miller move is one way, taking swings at Rousseau, at Epinesa, like regardless of where they are, like those were big swings in the top couple, Boogie Basham even, like in the top couple rounds of guys that they were hoping would turn into one of these guys. Even going back to taking Edmonds, pairing him with Allen. I think today, like I like Bernard and Milano. I think it's probably closer to not being on this team in the next couple of years than being on this team, but he's been awesome. But they want a freak like Tremaine Edmonds. They were hoping Tremaine Edmonds would turn into like this linebacker who can, make plays at the line and make plays in coverage and quarterback. Like that's their vision for this front. Like they've taken guys on this front seven, taken swings at guys that they want to have freaks on this team. Like they've taken guys with crazy traits because they believe in that. And everything that you're saying about the secondary is true. They can make it work back there, but if they have guys that just destroy everything up front, they're going to be able to do whatever they want. And so, like, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world to go. It is from the inside, but Ed Oliver turns into a superstar next to Myles Garrett. They will still have a chance to address. It's
not a fair comparison because the Eagles have heavily addressed the interior of their line over several years. And they hit on several picks. You don't just get great on interior line. The whole NFL wishes they had the Eagles' interior line. But unless you give the answer of how to do that in one offseason, it's not going to be the Bills' interior defensive line that's going to be dominating next year. You only have so many available options in the draft and free agency. picking at 30, the
goes-
likelihood of you getting a dominant interior lineman on your defense is slim. Free agency, if there was someone that was dominant interior lineman, you're paying that's in the prime, you're paying massive money for it. The reason we're not talking more about interior linemen is because there's no massive names out there that the Bills can just go out and get and instantly be better. Like in a perfect world, the Bills could go into the offseason and say, I want this. I want to fix this. They can't do that. So you have to look at what are the available options, what can improve my problems, and target those. That's why we're talking Myles Garrett right now, because he is a potential possibility that could drastically improve your defensive line. If I knew the Bills could get Chris Jones tomorrow, I would say go get Chris Jones. But it's not likely. And even the trading up, you're going to have to trade up top 10 to get something like that.
And also, it's a deep D line draft. So trading up, like, I don't know, and I don't think there's a guy that is like a Jalen Carter in this draft. I think it's more the depth. And I know Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, like those are good guys. They're going to be strong. But if it's strong in that position in the draft, I'd rather take the swing and then fill in. Take the swing where you can and fill in everywhere else. And you mentioned it, the interior D line free agent class, like it's Milton Williams, who is a good guy, who is a good player, who's just getting, kind of phased out, but he's going to get a huge money. And he's a guy who was not a good run defender at all. If you go to his I looked at PFF for Milton Williams getting ready for this, because I was like, oh, maybe he's interesting D-line name. Second in pass rush, like almost last in defensive in run defense. So it's not a guy that would fit well next to Ed Oliver. So not a great fit. Calais Campbell is a name I have on here. But that's not a long-term solution. That'd be like, and it's not a guy you're going to count on for 100% of the snaps. It's a guy you'd have on a snap count. Like DJ Jones is a 30-year-old guy, but he's like, these aren't sexy options. Like, and maybe DJ Jones, 30 years old, Denver, he's like 370 pounds. Maybe they take a mid-range swing like that. I'd honestly rather see them do something like that on the interior to address something next to Oliver. But if you're taking a big swing, like Mike, I'm in complete agreement with you. If they can get Garrett, and that's why them and the Eagles are the favorites, because they are two smart organizations that know the difference it can make.
Yeah, and Ed Oliver was supposed to be that guy. He was the 9th overall pick. He was a top 10 pick defensive tackle who was considered the second best D tackle in this draft class. Like, that's why it's frustrating, because the Bills did go after a top 10 guy, and it's not living up to the hype. Daquan Jones, before his pec tear, was playing at a dominant level, and now he's older, and he wasn't the same player last year returning. So, like, I say all this because Bills
I'm not even a fan of PFF. Honestly, I don't follow it like that, but I just looked Milton Williams up today, and it was funny that he was second in pass rush and then like 500th in run defense. Like, it was so stark. Like his overall grade was like a 70. It wasn't anything impressive.
The Terrell Bernard PFF grade
it's bad. He's not great. Yeah.
He's like a bottom quarter linebacker in the NFL, according to that. And I don't think he's that bad. Like, I think Bernard.
But to my point about Edmonds earlier, if there was a linebacker that they could trade for that had the same kind of impact, I think they would do that too. And they'd say, Bernard Milano, like, you're not getting as many snaps. We're going to bring this stud. I think where the Bills can improve is just the margins need to go from good to great. That's where.
Yeah, I think what it really, when you're evaluating the Bills defense, if we want to really overly simplify things and be honest here, it's a unit as a whole that lacks high-end talent. And they get all right results because they're coached up well. They have a good scheme, and they normally strategize well, but they don't have a lot of high-end talent. And what Myles Garrett provides is an opportunity at acquiring a guy who has an opportunity to make a play at any given moment and help you out in crucial situations and come up with a play in those moments. It's something where if you just go mid-tier guys, you're really not adding much to your team. It's going to be more of the same. And like, people are like, well, get Kenneth Grant at like 30 or whatever it is. Like, Greg Rousseau was a good pick. Like, he's turned out to be a solid.
He's a good pro.
But you know what Greg Rousseau is? That's a late first round defensive lineman. Like, It's that's what you're getting. Like if you told me, oh, we're gonna have Greg Rousseau on one side, Greg Rousseau on another side, are you feeling more confident against the Kansas City Chiefs on defense in the fourth quarter, like in a tie game with Pat Mahomes with the ball? No, you're not. You're not. Like, and that's what this comes down to. Like, I'm tired of Bills fans being like, well, this guy's good. Like, this guy's good. Like, this guy's decent. And we're going to fall in love with some random draft prospects. It's not about the draft prospects. It's not about guys that are going to take 2 to 3 years to develop. It's about right now you have Josh Allen. And I hear all Bills fans constantly talking about, oh, we're wasting his window. We keep losing. Well, do something about it.
Send it. Yes.
You make the bold move and you go for it. Because if you don't go for it, 3 years from now, when we're still complaining about the pass rush in the playoffs, we're going to be like, oh, well, now Josh Allen's 32 and we're nowhere closer to where we were.
I don't like the sound of that.
Make a bold move. Because you know what? If you get Myles Garrett and it doesn't work out, it's no different than Von Miller not working out. Guess what? We still made it to an AFC championship in 2 division rounds.
Things are still going to be. That's the thing is, what's the word? Like, all right. If realistically, if the Bills can add Myles Garrett, if they are the favorites in this trade and they can press the button as we're sitting here in the thing, the worst say it's next two firsts, a second this year, a second next year, and then maybe like a fourth and something like that. It's heavy price, but it's not more than 3, whatever. What is the worst that happens? The worst case scenario, like you said, they made the AFC title game this year. And now, okay, because they're not adding 2 rookies to this team, but they're adding Myles Garrett, and say they don't do anything else, all of a sudden, like, what do you think is going to happen? What's the worst thing they're going to happen? Are they going to miss the playoffs all of a sudden because they got rid of these 2 rookies? Like, that's the thing. Like you're saying, you got to do the cost benefit analysis here of what this is. Like, adding Myles Garrett to this defense raises their ceiling, and not just their ceiling, but their floor, such an amount that they have not seen in Sean McDermott's tenure as a coach. And they've had some pretty damn good defenses over that time. I think we'd all agree on that. But yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I've got a lot of names here, but we don't really need to go through them, Mike, because I think we're in the same thing. Like Chase Young, like I was going to say out on Chase Young. I would love Khalil Mack just for. I think
Khalil Mack actually does have.
I think that's possible.
So he did grade out as a top 10 player at his position, according to the PFF.
Yes.
And he's more of what he's older. You're probably getting the Von Miller production you got the last couple of years, but you're probably getting it at a discount if you get him.
Yes, and good vibes. Like people are going to just love having Khalil.
So I actually think the Khalil Mack idea is actually a good.
What if you have Mack? What if you get Mack and Myles Garrett?
I would actually like that, but I do think the Khalil Mack backup plan actually makes some sense. People are going to be like, "Oh, he's old," but you're probably not paying him massive money.
I'd give him 2 years. If it's 2 years, 13.
He's talking about possibly retiring, so maybe you want to give him 1 year, but maybe you can convince him into a reunion, coming back to Buffalo and trying to go for a Super Bowl for the place that he went to college at. So I'm not against it. At the end of the day, I'm open to any options that make the Bills better. I'm just tired of really everybody complaining about them not making the moves, but then not wanting them to make the moves.
I know. Like, we can't be risk averse then. Then let them take the swing.
Like, let them go after it. Like, you can't be like, oh, you don't do enough. And then when they do something, be like, oh, I don't know. I can't believe they did that. Like, don't be afraid. Do what you need to do.
Do what you need to do. All right. Well, I mean, so would you, the last question here for you, Mike, is the rest of it I have are secondary guys, the 2 big names, Ward, Holland, whether they go safety, whether they go corner. Would you pay big money for one of those stars at the safety or the corner position? Or would you go like a Darius Slay to pick up? What do you think they do in the secondary?
So I haven't even looked deep into the secondary yet, to be honest with you.
I'm very into the idea of Charvarius Ward because he's talked about wanting to win a Super Bowl. And he's made that part of his intention.
This is the way I look at it. I think Cole Bishop is going to be one of the starting safeties this year.
Yes. So Holland's probably going to get phased out then.
And I think Taylor Rapp is going to start opposite of him. So when you're building a roster, you got to be – there's some areas you got to go cheap to give you the money to go higher in other areas. I think safety, we pretty much they could make a move. Maybe they draft someone. I guess they could replace Taylor Rapp, but I do think the plan is for Cole Bishop to be a starter there. I think corner could be in play because I don't think Rasul Douglas is going to be back. As far as, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Rasul Douglas, but I think they could have someone new.
I'm in agreement with you.
Of Benford. Not too worried about linebacker. I'd say the positions I'm looking at defense are I have corner and defensive end / defensive tackle. Those are all the three that I have circled the most. The only other position on the team that I'm really even like looking at a little bit is wide receiver. And I really don't think anything else besides those 4 positions is really even
I agree.
significant concern right now at this point.
So would you do Ward if he was, let's say, 15 million?
I too early for me to say on that.
Okay.
I'll have to look more into that.
Okay. Well, I'm intrigued by the idea of them just shoring up corner and then like on day 1 of free agency and then seeing what else happens in the D-line market. Because the interesting thing is that they could sign a nice free agent deal for one of these corners or secondary guys and still theoretically make one of the trades for a Garrett, a Crosby, and working the phones. It'll be interesting what we start hearing on Monday, especially around the Myles Garrett market. Because timing's everything here too. Like, it depends if one of these guys gets impatient or one of these teams gets impatient over the next week. And also what the deals are going, how much funny money is getting thrown around during free agency to some of these guys too. Like, that's the thing. Milton Williams' contract is about to be crazy. Like, that's why when I looked up Milton Williams, I was like, there's no way the Bills are paying this dude that. Like, if you're going to pay, we'll see what happens. But any last thoughts before we go, Mike? I think we paid.
No, I'm pretty good. Good episode, good conversation. Nearly 2,500.
We're in lockstep here. I think we both just like go trade for Myles Garrett and figure everything else out.
Yeah, and like you got me out of watching an Ohio loss. Your Kent State Golden Flash
it didn't work out for you.
So depressing for me. Now I have
no, Mike. No. Not depressing. You're gonna beat Akron. And then it's going to be Kent State, Ohio in the final. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, we're not beating Akron. We can't even beat Eastern Michigan at home.
No one's beating Akron. Actually, they're going to smoke everybody.
I'm depressed because of Ohio basketball right now. I'm going to have a 3-day vacation.
You also guarantee the Sabres win tonight.
I also guarantee the Sabres win. Thanks, AJ, for reminding me of that. Like, they were minus 215. Like, you never see the Sabres favored that much. Like, I thought Vegas knew something. I guess
this
not.
Is crazy, bro.
I just assumed that like somebody on San Jose said they were gonna like give the game to the Sabres.
What can we even compare the Sabres to at this point?
I'm just like, honestly, this was just therapy for me to avoid all of the other depression. Like, I worked from 9 o'clock this morning to 7:30 this evening, only to come home and have my favorite college basketball team and my hockey team just embarrassed
and so you're
shit out of themselves. Heavy favorites too. Like the Sabres minus 215. Eastern Michigan was plus 400 against Ohio today. Plus 400. They won the game. They didn't just. But that's besides the point.
Your North Star is just Myles Garrett right now.
I just need Myles Garrett.
You're just looking forward, and you're like, that's Myles Garrett in the distance.
Yeah. When I go to Cleveland next week, it's not going to be for the match.
Find him.
I'm going to Cleveland to find Myles Garrett and recruit him.
Actually, don't find Myles. Myles wants to go to Buffalo. Go to Andrew Barry's house.
Dude, I'll do whatever.
And be like, call Brandon Bean right now, Andrew.
Dude, I will do whatever I need to do. But yeah, basically, we'll see what happens. I'm open to a lot of options. I'm not one of those fans that's like, you have to do this, you have to do that. Like, if they don't go after Myles Garrett, I'm going to understand. Like, he's probably going to demand the Browns are probably going to demand a massive haul for him. So I'm not saying the Bills have to make the move. I'd like to see them make it, but they don't have to. There's a lot of options on the table. I am not just putting all my eggs in one basket. I definitely have my preferences. There's a lot of different ways they can go about this. but we'll see how it happens. And I've been okay with a lot of their off seasons in recent years. I understood last year why they took the approach they did. They were in cap hell. They took on the dead cap. It was a reset year for them financially. They got rid of a lot of their veteran players, and they had to take small contracts, small level guys. This year, they're going to have some more room to be a little aggressive. I don't think Brandon Beane can help himself when he has an opportunity to go after somebody big time. That's why I think this is a possibility, but we'll see. We'll know at some point this offseason. I'd rather it be sooner than later because I don't want to be talking about this for the next 2 to 3 months as a possibility. I hate when we do this every single offseason. Just have it happen or don't have it happen. Give me peace of mind, and then we can focus on other things.
I would imagine the Browns are going to want this to happen sooner than later too. So we'll see what happens. But thank you, Mike. Thank you. Mike was saying before I cut him off earlier. Thank you for the 2,500 that we have viewers here that tuned in during this show. We'll be back next week as free agency will be at least one day into the tampering period. We'll have some deals announced. I'm sure Shefty will be saying that all the agents are going to be hitting them up with all their deals. So we'll be locked in there. But thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsor, Picasso's Pizza. We paid the bills. Have a great night, folks. Go Bills.